tagging entities. This is one that I think is very underused, and frankly solves a lot of the problems that many people have when it comes to communicating around a CAD model. Because it's very easy to misinterpret even things like a markup. Markups are very common. I showed you I can point a big arrow to a handle, but even within that, there's room for getting it wrong, misinterpreting the thing that I'm talking about, especially in more nuanced situations where I'm trying to point out like the details of a feature and not the whole, for instance. There's lots of scenarios like that where I may be asking a comment like, well, you know, why is this whole depth in this feature the way that it is, right? And in that scenario, it makes a lot more sense to use tagging entities rather than things like markup, because it eliminates that potential for misunderstanding, right? Because it's very obvious when you tag a comment with a feature that that's the thing that you're talking about, right? And so you can be much more literal in the sense of here's the thing that I'm talking about when you use something like tagging entities. Now, tagging entities really just eliminates any possible confusion about what you're talking about. And this is, markups do a great job of this, but there's always that room for error in kind of the subtle nuances of the details you're talking about. That a lot of that is eliminated with tagging entities because I can tag very specific entities. I can tag edges. I can tag, as we determined a moment ago. I can tag features. I can tag parts at the assembly level. I can tag individual faces, right? And so all of those things really give me a lot of flexibility. So I did a brief demo of this a moment ago, but I want to dive into it a bit more. All you really have to do if you want to tag something with a comment is right click on that something, right? So let's just say, for instance, I want to know, hey, why did you choose this depth for this whole feature? Well, if I point to a hole, there could be, room for misinterpretation there. But if I right click the actual feature in the feature list and say, add a comment and say, why is this hole depth so large, right? There's no ambiguity as to which feature I'm referring to, right? Because I'm tagging a feature in the feature list. And that's the important thing to stress. I'm not tagging a face on the part. That's different, right? I'm tagging the feature as a feature set, right? And so when I assign this as or I add this as a comment, it's actually tagging the feature. You'll see a little comment indicator on the feature itself, right? If you click the comment, it highlights, the faces associated with the feature, but the thing that I'm commenting on is the actual feature, right? And that's a subtle nuance, but in certain scenarios that can be really useful. And frankly, I think this is far more intuitive than marking up with arrows in a lot of scenarios, right? Like if I want to point to a fillet radius, I could point to, this fillet, but this fillet exists all over the part. It makes much more sense to go in and find the fillet, right click on it, add a comment and say, hey, is this radius right? Right? Because it's much more literal. It's much more specific in the thing that I'm asking questions about. So I can't stress this enough. I think this is one of the more underused features in all of the collaborative tools we have, because we built comments and everything in one kind of vertical integration. You can use comments directly on the objects within Onshape, even down to the sketch level, which we determined earlier. So you can be very granular. Just right click on the thing that you want to add a comment on, and you'll see add comment. And if you do it that way, it auto tags the entity. Now, I should stress there is another way to do this. If you click comment and just start a new comment, you just start a new blank comment, not using right click, there is this tag entity option, right? And so if I click that, then I can go find something like, oh, this extrude, and say, now I'm tagging that entity, right? And so it's just doing it a bit, backwards. You're clicking comment and then going tag entities. Totally a personal preference. But again, just two different ways of tagging entities, right click or starting a comment from scratch. But tagging entities, definitely one of my top tips for collaborating effectively. Using this as opposed to arrows and screenshots can be much more effective if you're trying to convey something about a specific feature. within your partner assembly. All right, so those are my top 10 features, top 10 tips that I have for using getting the most out of real-time collaboration in Onshape. Doing all of those things, you really are getting the most benefit out of all of our real-time collaboration tools. All right, so to sum things up here, I'm going to wrap things up with a final slide. If you're interested in learning more, if you're new to Onshape, or you just want to dive into more, I definitely recommend checking out the Onshape Learning Center. There's self-paced training, instructor-led training, technical briefing, certification, all things knowledge of Onshape. You'll find it at learn.onshape.com. So definitely, if you haven't already, check out the Onshape Learning Center at learn.onshape.com. So that's it for me. I am going to stick around and answer any outstanding questions that you have. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in. But that's it, everyone. Thank you and have a good day.